Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this breakfast launch of a brand new and very timely report, our STEM Skilled Future, an education roadmap for an innovative workforce. We're going to hear about the report's findings and recommendations over brekkie, but first of all, can you join me in thanking our sponsors, because we don't get slapdash spread like this just out of thin air. So our platinum sponsors for Activate today, the Defence Science Technology Group, the Department of Industry and Resources, CSIRO, Grok Academy, and WiseTech. And if you're sitting there thinking, hello, Michael Mosley, I'm seeing wall-to-wall carbs here, do not worry, because the hot meal service is about to begin. So it will be a full breakfast with protein aplenty for those of us freaking out about the post-COVID life. I am Bernie Hobbs, and I'm absolutely rapt to be your moderator this morning. If you know me, you know my background in science and education and the media, and getting people excited about and engaged with STEM is right at the heart of everything I have done. I'd like to begin this morning by acknowledging the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, the traditional custodians of this land, and pay my respects to elders past and present. And I acknowledge traditional knowledge and the deep history of innovation and education it embodies. And now to the report. It's no surprise to anyone in this room that the STEM skill shortage that's been banged on about for decades now is reaching looming crisis level, and the figures are still astonishing. In the next 2 years, Australia will need an extra 100,000 digitally skilled workers and another 40,000 engineers. Even if every cab driver I've ever had with an engineering qualification swapped jobs right now, we wouldn't come anywhere near making up that shortfall. So the message is clear. All of our efforts to get more people into STEM and keep them there have not worked. So this report calls for a serious rethink in our approach to encouraging careers in STEM and provides a roadmap for giving us the innovative workforce we need. It's not just some kind of rebranding exercise. It's not the Bureau of ATSE. Sorry, I know. Apologies in advance. But the result, as you can imagine, from an organisation like this, the report is the result of an incredibly rigorous process. And I know that because one of the organisers drew me a flowchart to explain it. So very ATSE, so meta. So last year, in the normal kind of asking fellows what can be done, what's needed, fellows were really big about the problem with STEM education and needing to get, to address the skills shortage. So they divided into topics. They had a fellow-led roundtable with this after a background paper had been developed by about 4,000 experts. You can imagine with the ever-changing, ever-increasing pace of change as well, those background papers were movable feasts. These roundtables with experts brought together every idea they had, every complaint they had, every issue they had with things that have or haven't worked or haven't been tested. They were brought together in summaries, and those summaries make up this report. So it's been a result of an extremely rigorous synthesis process. The roundtables explored skills shortages across the critical STEM areas: maths, digital skills, agricultural technologies, engineering, and entrepreneurship. So the results, as I said, are outlined in not just results, but in short and medium-term policy solutions, and they're ambitious policy solutions, which means making them happen is going to take an incredibly big collaborative effort between governments, industries, and other stakeholder bodies. So I hope you're all ready for a solutions-focused challenge, because that's what it's going to take to deliver on our technology-powered, human-driven potential. So to kick things off officially, I'd like to hand the floor over to Professor Hugh Bradlow, the President of ATSE. Hugh has a reputation for speaking his mind, and that sometimes cannot be contained to a 5-minute time slot. I think we're going to...
5 minutes.
No. I think we'll see how we go this morning. Thanks, Hugh.
Thanks, Bruce. Thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to pay my respects to the Gadigal people on whose lands we meet and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. So today we're here to talk about STEM education and in particular the reports that ATSE's just done. But I'm going to go a bit off-piste here. I want to talk about the elephants in the room. So if anything the last 3 years has taught us, it should be that we can't rely on autocratic regimes for our energy and for our manufactured goods. We have to accept that if Australia's future is going to be secured, we have to be able to make our own goods, power our own systems and defend ourselves. And I think we've got to accept that as a new reality, which is a big change from the last 50 years. At the same time, we're fortunate in that new technologies such as the Internet of Things, data analytics, machine learning and others are enabling us to actually reindustrialize the country because we can increase productivity by orders of magnitude and therefore take onshore a whole lot of things that we offshored in the past. But if we're going to do that, we have to have the skills. We can't do it without the skills. And now I'm going to annoy half of ATSE because I'm going to say the key skills are engineers. We need engineers because those are the people who make things and fix things. So we're going to be desperately short of them. According to the Group of 8, by 2025, we will be short of 40,000 engineers. Now, we can fill the gap partially by immigration, and far be it from me to suggest that some of the best engineers are immigrants. But we have to grow our own, and to do that, we have to take a step back, and we have to address the historic low numbers of Year 12 students doing maths and the physical sciences. And you'll notice I'm emphasizing maths and the physical sciences. I don't believe the problem in the biological sciences is as acute as in maths and the physical sciences. And any engineer who thinks they can do engineering without maths and the physical science is deluded. So going back to some previous ATSE research, we compared Australia to the leading engineering economies of the world. And the one thing they all had in common was that their science teachers had a degree in the discipline in which they were teaching and then did a one-year postgraduate pedagogical study. They did not have this method we have of doing a B.Ed and doing a Cook's tour of everything. And as one of my ATSE colleagues said to me one day, he's a professor of maths at one of the leading universities, he said his son, who was he's a maths teacher, he said he can tell you 18 different ways to do fractionalization or whatever he needed to do, but he couldn't pass a first-year maths exam. So the issue here is if we're going to inspire students in Year 12 to do maths and physical sciences, we need in-discipline teaching, and that is something that we just seem to be dodging. But it goes beyond that, because if we're going to attract people of the right caliber, we need to be able to pay them properly. And if you look at today, if you're in the maths or physical sciences, the salaries you can command outside teaching from banks and big corporations are huge. There's an endless demand. I think I've seen the figures I've seen are something like a shortage of 100,000 data scientists, which is basically an engineer by another name. The fact is that we have to abandon this strongly held belief. And by the way, my wife is a Year 12 English teacher, and I'm really glad she's not in the room because she'd really give me a hard time over this. But we have to abandon the belief that every teacher, irrespective of the demand for their discipline or their ability, should be paid the same. We have to accept that you have to pay differentially based on the need and the skill of the person doing that. And until we do that, we're not going to attract the right caliber of people we need into the sciences. So to me, those are the elephants in the room. We keep dodging those questions, and unless we address them, we're going to continuously, we'll be having this discussion in 10 years' time. Fortunately, you won't have to listen to me. But the fact is that this will keep going around in a circle unless we start addressing those big topics. However, having said all that, the ATSE report today addresses some important issues, particularly raising the profile of the STEM careers amongst students. We need to make it more attractive. We need something like LA engineers or something like that to make it or maybe it's a TikTok video, lots of them. The second thing is we need to increase diversity. We can't operate an economy, especially in engineering, where something like 20% of half the population is not are excluded, or 30% are not participating. We have to make sure everyone participates, and that means we need more diversity and inclusion. So hopefully I've kicked off this discussion today, and hopefully the panel will address some of these topics. Thank you, Bernice.
Thanks very much for that, Hugh. True to form, starting off with, I think I'll go off piece today. So, but the key message, obviously, from Hugh's speech is that we are all engineers here today, of various kinds. One thing, Hugh, trying to attract an audience, a younger audience into STEM, LA engineers will probably get you people in my age group, I think. Well, it was a great show. I would like you now to join, and we will be hearing more in depth with an overview and then digging deeply into some of the sectors within the report in just a moment. But I'd like you to join me in welcoming one of our sponsors, Professor Emily Hilder, who's a Fellow of the Academy, Chief Platforms Defence Science and Technology Group, to speak with us now, to address us now. So, Emily? Oh, yeah. Oh, with the rock and roll entry. Wow. The President didn't get that. This is clearly just sponsors only. Nice work.
I had nothing to do with that, but it is one of my favourite pieces that we have from DSTG. Look, Hugh, unfortunately I'm not going to go as off-piste as you. I probably shouldn't today, but I do support what you have to say about the importance of engineers to build our STEM future. And I really just want to start by congratulating ATSE on the release of this report, which I think provides a really useful roadmap for the future of a STEM-trained and innovative workforce. This is actually something that we need to get after in Australia, as Hugh so eloquently said there, because if we want to remain competitive in the global market and particularly grow and maintain our most important sovereign capability, which is our people, then this is something that we have to get after at pace. And I know that everyone in this room knows and appreciates that promoting and investing in the STEM workforce is the way forward. As she mentioned, we also know that we have a problem at the moment. We're not keeping up. The results from our school students in science and maths show that we're declining or stagnating compared to other countries, and we need to improve. And this has major implications for defence, which is why we're so pleased to see this report. We're in a fast-changing world where we need to work differently to get that sovereign advantage and to be able to generate the asymmetric effect we need to help to keep a safe and secure world. And we know that a STEM-trained workforce is absolutely key to meeting these challenges. It's something that is front of mind for us every day in a Defence Science and Technology group. We know that science, technology, engineering and math skills will underpin our industries and jobs of the future, and especially in the defence sector. So as a large employer and a driver of what we think is a large and critical industry sector, Defence believes that we have a critical role to play in reversing this tide, and helping to expand and strengthen our STEM workforce is going to be key to achieving the sovereign capability we need. In fact, our needs for STEM talent are so significant that we've recognised recently that we need to play a front line in doing this, and this is why things like this report are just so important. It highlights in particular the need for us to all work together to raise the profile of STEM careers and attract the next generation and next cohort of STEM professionals. And I agree, we need to start early. We need to start as early as possible and encourage those from the earliest stages of education to engage with STEM. We need to highlight the creativity aspects of STEM. This is one of the things that really attracted me to science, but I can tell you I did want to be an engineer. And we need people who are creative problem solvers. And most of all, I think we need to encourage a more diverse workforce in order to harness the full talent we can. So we know that developing STEM skills is going to enable us to take advantage of advances in technology that ensure that we can both create and avoid strategic surprise for Australia. We also know that we're not going to be able to do this if we can't harness the full capacity of talent available in Australia. I've spoken about defence, which is dear to my heart, particularly in my current role, but this is not just about STEM professionals in defence, but across all sectors, where a STEM workforce will support and grow an agile, innovative, resilient, safe, ethical and stable future for all Australians. And I'd just like to, in particular, commend the report for identifying that this is a shared challenge and that Australia needs to work together to solve this current skills shortage, which I think is a key message that we should all hear. That includes, in my view, all levels of government, industry, unions, peak bodies, educators and individuals as identified, and that we're not going to do this without increasing our focus on diversity and inclusion. And I really appreciate that the report calls out this is not just the right thing to do, but without it, we will not fill our capacity and capability gaps. And I just want to say that this is a challenge that Defence stands ready to take on with all of you. So once again, I thank ATSE for putting the future of our STEM workforce on the agenda and for identifying ways to address the challenges that we're facing. Thank you.
Thanks, Emily, and thanks for handling that rock and roll moment at the start. I didn't read my notes, which said wait till after video has run before inviting Emily up. Our next moment is where we get to get the big picture of the report, and that's from the co-chairs of the report. So these two people dragged together from all of those different roundtables with 150 experts and brought together the essence of those, all those discussions into the report. So first of all, Professor Tisha Morell, Head of School of Education at the University of Queensland. Tisha has a teaching background in all shapes and sizes of schools in the US, and she's been an academic working with state and federal agencies to advance the teaching of science, and she's a past president of ASTE, the Association for Science Teacher Education. So Tisha will be joined with Professor Mark Hoffman. Mark's the Deputy Vice-Chancellor Academic and a Vice President of the University of Newcastle. He's responsible for the academic activities of the university, including its education program. He's also a Fellow and Board Director of ATSE. So would you join me in welcoming Tisha and Mark, who will do a seamlessly integrated tag team approach up here, and I will just keep talking and filling while they make their way to the stage. So we'll begin with one of them, and the other one will come in straight after. We could do it with a step. New hip coming next week. Oh, good job. Mark and Tisha.
Thank you very much, Bernie, and we will do a seamless tag team here. We too would like to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation as the traditional owners and custodians of the lands at which we're meeting, and pay our respects to elders past and present. As co-chairs of this report, we're honoured to be a part of the launch today. As chair of ATSE's Education Policy Forum, I'm responsible for overseeing the Fellows' contributions to education policy positions. And there is no doubt that education in underpinning technological sciences and engineering capability is one of our nation's greatest challenges. ATSE Fellows have deep and broad insights into the skills needed in our fields. A position on education, however, requires a partnership with educators. And for this reason, I've been very pleased to work with Professor Tisha Morell, who, as you heard, is one of Australia's leading thinkers and practitioners of science and mathematics education in oversighting the development of this report. And I just want to emphasise that we often, as engineers, science technologists, talk about the challenge, but a partnership with educators is going to be key to resolving this. As we're all aware, Australia is experiencing a STEM shortage, which is of deep concern to industry, government and the broader community. Now, many measures show that this shortage is actually increasing, and Emily referred to those earlier. And there are concerns regarding the pipeline, because therefore it's both a long and a short-term challenge. Consequently, there are many initiatives underway across the country to address this challenge. Now, in formulating this report, we considered this conundrum and have sought to address overarching policy issues, plus identifying some key industries for Australia. To explore and examine this problem, ATSE brought together leading experts from a broad range of sectors and industries, focusing specifically on mathematics, engineering, digital skills, agricultural innovation and entrepreneurship. You saw the flowchart. I don't know if you could read it. In July and August of this year, ATSE held a series of roundtables to explore the key issues in each of these 5 domains. In all, over 120 leaders from industry, academia and government participated in these brainstorming sessions. Now, just sort of think about this, because it's unlikely that such a significant group of STEM leaders has ever come together with educationalists to address this challenge. Now, I really want to acknowledge the considerable time and energy, and most distinctively expertise, which was contributed to this report.
So each of those domains suggested a number of immediate and longer-term steps that could be undertaken to improve the shortfalls in each area. ATSE examined the collective recommendations for commonalities for immediate remediation, and the result is a set of 4 overarching concrete policy recommendations aimed at improving STEM education in Australia, focusing on skills to transform our future leaders. And you have a lovely copy on your seat. While the report provides a summary of each of the roundtables, as well as the overarching recommendations, we would like to share a brief synopsis of these 4 with you this morning. The first is the need to develop common language, establish a national skills taxonomy to streamline consistent communication about needs and pathways among Australia's organisations and individuals. And that will allow individuals and organisations to communicate clearly with each other about needs and pathways. The National Skills Commission on the Australian Skills Classification has begun to undertake this work, but a skills vocabulary that builds on or accelerates this work is needed. This will provide the articulation necessary for identifying pathways for upskilling, reskilling, and transferring skills between comparable roles across sectors, and to help with matching supply and demand in the workforce, while more accurately forecasting industry-specific skill demands. The second recommendation is to focus on evidence-based decisions. We need to prioritize and invest in evidence-based approaches to STEM program development and assessment to ensure training is fit for purpose and provides value for money. This requires developing a way to assess STEM resources in training programs to ascertain their quality, a self-assessment and quality framework to use in evaluating the ever-growing collection of training programs and materials will allow individuals and organizations to better select resources and programs that are fit for purpose. The establishment of a centralized repository of STEM resources would also assist in this endeavor, to build on previous initiatives and to connect what is currently fragmented collections.
The third recommendation is to encourage lifelong STEM learning, to promote and support a culture of lifelong STEM learning in the workforce, to ensure Australia has the skills it needs now and into the future. And I'm going to go a bit off-piste, a little bit less radically here. We have so many people in the workforce who are actually involved in STEM industries at a trades level, and upskilling, lifelong learning is so important to raise the level that we have in those skills. We have school teachers who are teaching out of area, upskilling those through lifelong learning to be STEM teachers. Because the particulars of STEM careers are continually evolving. We can see that most readily in the technology and entrepreneurship sectors. It's essential that the Australian workforce continues to embrace lifelong STEM learning. By creating and incentivising participation in learning initiatives, we can highlight the value of ongoing learning to build capability and career prospects. Now finally, the fourth recommendation, and this is key to achieving the other 3, is to create a mindset shift to raise the profile of STEM careers in Australia to showcase their attractiveness and accessibility. The opportunities and responsibilities of STEM careers need to be made transparent so the general population can develop a better understanding of what these careers entail. They also need to see them as accessible and attainable. Instead of promoting Australia as a vacation destination, we need to showcase Australia as a place for cutting-edge careers. These shifts will help us to diversify and strengthen our STEM workforce.
So the full report expands on each of these recommendations, and it also includes the sector-specific recommendations unique to each of the working group domains. And we urge you to read through the entire report, and particularly those who wish to focus on specific themes, as obviously we couldn't do it justice in this brief overview. In closing, we would also like to take this opportunity to publicly thank everyone involved in this effort. The 120 experts mentioned, plus the ATSE policy teams whose support has been seminal. It was a huge undertaking, and we feel the resulting roadmap will appropriately guide action among government, industry, education, unions, peak bodies, and individuals to drive rapid and sustainable change. All of us need to work together. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Tisha and Mark. And for anyone who's not a skiing buff, off-piste is not what engineers do at 6 p.m. on a Friday. It's going off track somewhat, but they seem to have taken it and run with it this morning. That was great to get that overview, and I think we'll definitely be digging in a bit deeper to the national taxonomy call and the diversity, which Emily also raised about it, not just because it's the right thing to do, because it's the only bloody way we're going to get anywhere near recruiting the workforce that we need. The lifelong learning and this crossing over, this cross-fertilisation and mobility between, related trades and professions to try and address those skills needs are going to be very big issues coming up. So what we'd like to do now is dig in a bit deeper on a couple of those 5 key STEM areas that we talked about, and that's digital skills and engineering, which you may have heard a bit about this morning. These are 2 areas and vocations which could make or break Australia's future potential, and both, as you know, face dire skills shortages. So to join me in this, I'm going to have 2 people who are heavily involved in the report process. Chief Engineer of Engineers Australia, Jane McMaster. So in that role, Jane leads the engagement and policy discussion with industry, government, academia and other stakeholders. Her background's in aerospace, mechanical and systems design, and normally I don't read out the whole bio, but she worked primarily on supersonic flight vehicle design, which is probably the coolest thing I'm going to say today. So thank you. Jane, if you wouldn't mind joining us up here, please. Please welcome Jane McMaster. And also in this discussion, Professor Shazia Sadiq, Data Engineer and Director of the ARC Industry Transformation Training Centre on Information Resilience at the University of Queensland. Shazia has made incredible and lasting contributions. Okay, she hasn't designed a supersonic jet, but she has made incredible contributions to responsible and integrated solutions for effective information processes and data quality management, something we're all becoming a little bit more aware of in the leaks that have happened in the last few weeks. Shazia has also been incredibly involved in engaging a diverse group of people in ICT with national competitions like Women in Computing initiatives that have got thousands of young people involved. So I'd like you to join me in welcoming Shazia up as well.
We all have a responsibility to build our nation's future. A strong pipeline of talented people that choose technology careers is a key part of this. At WiseTech, we're passionate about supporting early exposure to the world of digital technology. This means creating experiences in primary school and throughout high school that educate and inspire our youth into rewarding and important tech-focused careers. And it means breaking social biases about what girls should be studying and enabling women into technology. We're excited to be working with Grok Academy to build Australia's tech future.
Grok's aim is to educate all learners in transformative computing skills, empowering them to meet the challenges and opportunities of the future, just as Richard and WiseTech have. As a digital technologies curriculum author, I'm excited that WiseTech sponsorship has made Grok's interactive content and automated feedback freely available to all Australian students, their teachers and their families. Grok and WiseTech invite ATSE, its fellows and their organisations to help us transform technology education in Australia.
Note to self, don't start talking when the sponsor's video is about to begin. And I do want to acknowledge WiseTech and Grok and thank you again as platinum sponsors for this morning. Also, this is a Sydney-based operation, so you can definitely, Ross and Duncan or Daniel or the man in the brown leather jacket facing away from me, who I've already offended twice, Richard Hobbs, are here this morning. So please make yourself known to them if you're interested in helping with STEM education and diversity in this local area. You've also got a stand upstairs? Yeah, thank you. So there'll be more about all of that. I'm hoping that's enough grovelling for ruining your video moment. I'm truly sorry about that. I've just got to start reading those italicised notes here. So now back to our deep dive into the report. So let's start with you, Jane, and with a very simple question. You'll have no trouble answering in 10 words or less, I'm sure. It's already been said a few times, by 2024 we need 40,000 more engineers. What can be done?
Okay, thanks, Bernie. Yes, an important question that's already been addressed. But I hope it's all right just before we start. I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge Robin King, who I'm sure is known to everyone in the room. Robin King was the session chair for this report, the engineering skills shortage, and tragically passed away a couple of months ago. Much has been said over the last couple of months about Robin, the scholar and the gentleman, and his enormous contribution to our profession and to engineering education in particular. He was absolutely passionate about the challenges that we write about in this report, and he'll be missed, not only as a colleague who was immensely respected and a pleasure to work with, but also for the uncountable number of hours and valuable work and insights that he contributed.
Thanks, Jane.
So, on to the question of what can be done. Okay, it's a multifaceted and complex problem. We've heard about the demand for engineers, we think but at least 40,000 in the next couple of years, but up towards 100,000 beyond that before 2030. We have two main sources of supply of engineers in Australia, skilled migrants and domestically trained engineers, and both supply channels are not keeping up with the pace of demand.
And that's been for a while, so there's a big backlog.
It's been for a while, and that's a good point. It's not a new problem. So there was a Senate committee in 2010 and a task force in 2012. If you read through the recommendations, they're largely the same as what we're coming up with today, and they haven't been acted on. So that's the first key message. We actually have to get on and do something. But we know it takes a long time to produce an engineer. You know, it starts in early childhood, but the formal training and then the formative experience after that takes a good 10 years from the moment that someone chooses to become an engineer. So we need to be considering the whole pipeline, the whole timeline, right from early childhood. So we can chunk it up into 5 main groups, I think. The school years, what needs to be done there. I think Hugh and Emily have touched on this and others this morning already, but of paramount importance is inspiring and encouraging more young Australians to choose to study engineering. Now, there's so much in that. Engineers Australia did some research last year into women in engineering, but the findings can be replicated to both genders. We found that of all the women who didn't choose to study engineering, so they chose to study other fields, economics, law, medicine, science, health and so forth, 90% of them didn't even consider engineering or only fleetingly considered it. 90%. And the single most common reason cited was a lack of familiarity with what engineering is and what engineers do. So that's a huge opportunity. We know exactly what we need to do. We need to raise the awareness of what engineering is.
And one of the things that certainly comes out in some of the report is making sure that people understand, and women in particular, understand that engineering is problem solving and it's supporting communities, like really, getting beyond the hard hat on the construction
Getting those
side.
positive messages out about how it contributes positively to the world is an important message. Hugh also raised the importance of, and others have raised the importance of standards of maths education in particular in schools. Someone mentioned that our standards relative to other OECD countries is declining. In maths, we ranked 10th in 2003. In 2018, we ranked 30th and dropped below the OECD average for the first time. So it's a significant challenge that we need to get on with. In terms of the university years, internships, if you're from industry. That's important because it helps keep our graduate engineers in the engineering workforce and also provides a really valuable context for them to consolidate their learning. But we also need to address graduation rates. Only 25% of engineering students finish within the 4 years, and we think only 50 to 60% of engineering students finish with an engineering degree who start. So we're losing 40% of commencing students. Retention in the engineering workforce is significant. I'm really glad that Hugh mentioned the salary, the pay gap. We are losing a lot of engineering graduates, especially the top performers, to the banks and management consultants. I was one of them. I joined a management consultancy when I graduated 30 years ago. They have their polished pitches, they have their slightly higher starting salaries. I went back after 18 months because I missed technical engineering. But many don't. So we've got to keep and inspire our young engineers to stay in the engineering workforce. And I think pay is something that we can't ignore anymore.
And what sort of pay difference are we talking?
Well,
just because I'm thinking of reskilling.
I mean, it's significant. I mean, the graduate starting salary, depending on the data that you look at, is around $55,000 to $65,000, and that's something that we need to explore and address. And a mid-career and late-career engineer, it's a really solid career. It's very solid, but I do think that there's another tier emerging in banking and management consultancy that pays a lot higher. So we need to explore how we're paying our engineers. But we also need to look at other reasons for, especially in the diversity angle, women in engineering are twice as likely to suffer imposter syndrome as male engineers, and women in other fields. So imposter syndrome is something we need to address. And then, of course, there's the skilled migrants. Only 40% of skilled migrant engineers in the country work as engineers. Literally, they are taxi drivers. I ask every taxi and Uber driver I meet,
what kind of engineer are you? Yeah,
exactly. And it is not a cliche or an exaggeration to say that many, if not most, are.
It is an exaggeration because some are doctors. Yeah.
That's correct. So we need to, we have a pool of engineers in this country who are not working as engineers. And so we need to address that mismatch somehow. And there are some well-known barriers to workforce participation of skilled migrants, and we need to start addressing those. And they include a lack of local networks, a lack of local knowledge and experience and referees.
And cultural differences.
Cultural differences, perceived cultural differences, those biases that we know we all have but probably aren't doing enough to address. Yep. So there's a whole range of things. We need to take a systemic view if we want engineers in the short, medium and long term.
Great. And I have to say, I read the report yesterday, and it does go through some really fine point, granular, that's an engineering term, ideas on how to address each of these. And so it's all there in your report in a much more friendly font than I read yesterday. So I should just say, we do have a roving camera in the room. Sorry, not a roving camera, roving, I just terrified you all. A roving microphone in the room. Edwin, can you... okay, so if you do have a question, once we've had our first discussion here with Shazia as well, then please make your questions known to Edwin and we'll get to those a little bit later. So we'll follow through on a couple of those issues, Jane, in a moment, but Shazia, digital skills, I mean, there's so few parts of our lives that aren't completely, overrun with, or at least taken on large parts of digital skill, whether as a user like me or as a producer like you or somewhere in between. I was shocked, as much as I was just shocked then about the slippage in maths out of the OECD, that we slipped 5 places on the World Digital Competitiveness Ranking in a single year, and we're at serious, this is an actual quote from you, Australia is at a serious risk of becoming a digital laggard when compared to other OECD countries. I mean, you know, considering we pride ourselves on being, you know, such quick uptakers of technology, like that's where it ends, with buying the latest phone by the looks of it. So what can we do? How can we best ensure that digital skills at all levels, not just users like me, but producers, are up to the task?
Oh, thank you for that question, Bernie. I think we need to unpack digital skills before we start this conversation, and the report very appropriately outlines that as a developing of a shared understanding. So when we talk about digital skills, you know, a lot has been said about it. What do we really mean? You know, who are we upskilling, reskilling, cross-skilling? So when we were developing this report, we had the opportunity to talk to a whole range of experts, and in order to anchor that discussion, we developed a bit of a framework, and I want to unpack that. So think of a pyramid. Think of a pyramid, and the bottom of the pyramid, we're talking about billions of people. Billions of people who need digital skills. Grandma wants to see a picture that the grandson posted, right? So that level. Then you move up that pyramid and you think about, you know, millions of people. During COVID, I really like that when you go to a restaurant, you got a QR code, you don't have to get up and put your order, you've got it right there. You know, your gardener sends you an invoice and it's a click away, right? So all of these digital skills in small businesses and with individuals are very important, but applicable to millions of people. And then moving up, we can think about hundreds of thousands of people who need these skills. Think about a biomedical scientist, a PhD student who's trawling through terabytes of genomic data, doesn't have a coding background, but is making sense of that data. And these are very savvy users, and Australia certainly has a lot of them. And they are consuming those sophisticated softwares and using it for very advanced work that they're doing. And then when we get to the pointy end of the pyramid, there's just tens and thousands of people in that. So there were some reports that about 30 to 40,000 people who have that particular skill set are currently sitting in a handful of companies. Google, Facebook, Tencent, Alibaba, Amazon, maybe a couple more, and that's it. And what we do need is we need hundreds of thousands of people, right, globally and including in Australia. And I'd really like to focus on that top end. These are the people who build those libraries that are so accessible now that anybody can download those libraries, pretty much make a few clicks, and it will produce something. But do we really understand what those deep learning, machine learning, sophisticated algorithms are producing through, you know, terabytes of data? So these are those people who build those libraries and understand, and they are able to explain what's happening behind them. And I really want us to think about, you know, if we are to be a nation of leaders, of creators, of designers, of builders, and not just savvy users, who are those people? How do we train those people? And what sort of frameworks we need to facilitate that. Yeah.
And we heard Hugh mention about the taxonomy of skills. Yeah. How will that play into the work you're talking about there that needs to be done to increase our skill set?
So a few years ago, I had the privilege of leading curriculum development at UQ for data science, and I started investigating what's going on around the world. At that time, there was less than 5 programs. There's Columbia, there's UniSA was a leader here. And when you start to look at you know, how people were approaching it, it was very demand-driven, because there was an article by Harvard Business Review at that time that said, this is the sexiest job. Data scientist is the sexiest job of the 21st century, you know, 6-figure salaries. So a lot of demand was coming through. But as you look at that curriculum, you know, to some it was basically statistics. To others, it was computational models, machine learning. To others, it was data strategy and data governance. It's not right or wrong, easy or hard, good or bad. We need to embrace the full scale of what these, what these skills require, but we need to develop a shared understanding that can help us associate skills with roles. And I think that taxonomy piece that's coming out of this report really captures that very important part. And we don't have to start from scratch. There are frameworks out there, historical frameworks are out there, but the world is changing. So I can refer to ACM, the Association of Computing Machinery, very old and prominent association that produces a computing curricula every few years. I can talk about SFIA, SFIA, that talks about the skills framework for the information age. So there is good places for us to start. But the world is changing, and we need to get our head around, when we talk about certain digital skills, what are we really talking about? Which roles are we trying to address? And what are the competencies that are needed for those roles?
And it also builds on the National Skills Commission work as well. So there's a lot of groundwork there. It's not starting from scratch, and it will really help in transferability of skills, not just in digital, but in engineering as well, and mobility within a sector as well. So I think that's a really critical one, and it is the first of the overarching recommendations. So we've got just under 10 minutes left, so I'll go to our first question, but please do shoot your hand up if you've got a question. Time flies quickly. Yes, if you could just say your name, please.
My name is Abid Chowdhury. I'm the chief scientist of a new company called Genofax. And actually, my question was partly answered by the speaker as I heard her talking about biological science and big data and so on. So I was educated in the US in science initially, and one of the things that I picked up from there was that we had to take a lot of courses in economics, social science, even literature. And I have noticed in the world two types of countries, one that allows this kind of diverse training and others don't. And the whole relevance of STEM in the context of society is often determined by whether you have taken other courses or whether you have educated yourself. So one comment I would like to make, and the question also to the current speaker, to what extent you think that issue should be addressed in a proactive way?
Would you like to respond to that, Shazia?
So I couldn't agree more with the need for cross-disciplinary skills and cross-disciplinary collaboration. I think we observe that in our research teams. We only make progress when we work with others, and especially in the context of big data and these sophisticated sort of technologies, emerging digital technologies is what we like to say. There is a whole range of issues. So unless we work with social scientists, and we work with people from business, we cannot get our head around things like the bias, which is often present in the data. The algorithm will produce something, but there needs to be somebody there to help us unpack that. What are the implications? What's the, for disadvantaged people, potential harm that may come out of the decision making that is going to that these technologies are going to present. So thank you for that asking that question. And cross-disciplinary skills is indeed a very important question. With packed curriculums, it is not so easy to pack them even further. And I think we need to work pretty hard to make sure we get the balance right.
So two things from that. One is this point of, so we've mentioned diversity inclusion. I think most speakers this morning have mentioned diversity inclusion, but it's not just cultural and it's not just gender, it's also discipline and making sure that there's really good representation of all those things to get the best in each sector. The other thing was something that just slipped my mind. Yeah. Has anyone else had menopause? Yeah, it's a beautiful gift. So what was the... No, okay, I'll have to come back to that one. Anyway, we do have another question from Richard from WiseTech, the platinum sponsor, one of the platinum sponsors of breakfast here this morning.
Dorothy Dixon. It's not a Dorothy Dixer. To all of you. You mentioned before about the wage gap. And in the industry that I work in, which really uses a lot of software engineers, sadly we have Facebook as a competitor for employment. That's a terrible idea, really.
Sorry, Richard, if you could go a bit more.
Yeah, that better? Okay. Our wage for software engineers is quite high. It's 3 or 4 times the quoted starting wage that you've got there. Now, I know that a couple of examples here, just to give you some context. We've been sponsoring the BOT program at both the University of Technology and New South Wales, and we give effectively a living wage during the degree, and a lot of those graduates go into consulting, which is a shock for me because I thought we were building software engineers. Separately, I know that at the current statistics, only 23% of the software engineering students are female when they start, and only 13% graduate. And strikingly, we're asked, correctly, to balance the diversity in the company, but we're doing it from a pool of resources which are 13% female. That's an extraordinarily difficult problem to solve. You just can't do that. All you can do is feed from that particular pool. Now, the other thing I've heard, and I've heard many software company recruiters say this, they're just going to stand at the end of the assembly line out of university and pick off the students that they want to hire, which is irresponsible in the extreme. We need to be going right back to the early days of primary school and deal with the social biases and encourage children to have curiosity and to learn deeply about the world. Now, was there a question there? I'm not sure.
I don't think it matters because I think you've just given a really nice summary of all of the aspects that are covered in the report, Richard. So thank you very much for that. Yeah, please.
Look, I couldn't agree with you more, Richard. You've hit on so many important aspects there. In relation to a lot of engineers, software and other, going off into consulting, part of the reason is engineers have a very versatile and transferable skill set and mindset. Engineers have topped the employer satisfaction survey that the Australian government runs the last 2 years running. This year's survey results are due out in the next month, so it'll be interesting to see where engineering sits, if it's at the top again. In previous years, it's always been towards the top. So we train engineers well in this country. We bring great engineers into this country, and they are sought after across the whole economy. Your point about women in engineering is absolutely true. Women in engineering research results show that females would appreciate more support at university. I think that imposter syndrome, which we define to be sort of devaluing or undervaluing your own ability and achievements, that means that women tend to not put themselves forward for opportunities as readily as perhaps their male counterparts, so we need to be absolutely mindful of that. But I'm very well aware it's a very difficult problem to solve when you're drawing from a small pool, and I think absolutely we need to address those biases in our education systems and society more broadly from a very early age.
And discuss them more as well, because imposter syndrome is not confined to engineers, it's women and other people throughout society. So the more it's discussed, the more it becomes aware and hopefully reduces some of that bias. Now, I did remember the question that I had. So when our first questioner was talking about the skills, 2 things. One is you were saying, Sharia, about the university courses, and one of the things in the report is that there's just not the demand from students for university courses. So we need to do something to make the university courses more appealing to students. But the other thing is that you don't need a 4-year degree to do a lot of the work in engineering or data science. So what are some of the alternatives that are being looked at and that the skills taxonomy will enable to help people transition, like micro-credentialing and that sort of thing?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so I think this is a really important point. So most of you will probably be aware that there are 3 occupational categories within the engineering profession. Engineering associate, which is typically a 2-year qualification, engineering technologist, typically a 3-year qualification, and professional engineer, which is typically a 4-year qualification. On the demand and workforce planning side, industry tends to assume that they need professional engineers to do all their work, but we all know that the full engineering team is what's required to do the engineering work. And I absolutely know that from my background. We couldn't have done the projects that we worked on without associates and technologists.
Those supersonic jets, yeah.
Yeah, they have specialist skills that professional engineers don't have. So what we're doing with industry is try to encourage when they're doing workforce planning, and they are making headway sector by sector, energy, for example, space, defence, workforce planning and so forth, is to think at a level of granularity but below which they typically think and define their workforce needs in terms of the skills. So I think if we can bring the skills taxonomy work together with the workforce planning work, we'll be much better positioned.
And one of the other calls is for National Council of Engineering, and that's based on the G of 8 call, which will also help improve this communication across sectors and work with that taxonomy to deliver this outcome. All in the report. We are pushing for time, but we've got a couple more questions. Yep.
Right, hello. My name is Cynthia Nolan, and I work with a lot of schools. And some of the questions that came up around how do we organise the pipeline, I've spoken to many parents and I've run a lot of events with parents around this, especially around girls. And one of the biggest issues is that a lot of the universities do not encourage or don't sort of acknowledge learning of digital skills or engineering as an assumed knowledge or a prerequisite to go into university. So parents advise their children, rightfully so, I'm a parent and I want all the opportunities for my children to not necessarily study these in secondary and to study the more traditional sort of maths and more traditional sciences, which is great. However, it doesn't engender that passion for engineering and digital solutions, and so inevitably your pipeline keeps reducing. Is there anything we can do with the universities to encourage that assumed knowledge? Thank you.
If I may take my computer scientist, engineer, educator hat off and put my parent hat on. So I totally agree with you. You know, I've participated as a judge in many competitions with primary school and high school students, and they every time, you know, they blow me away with their creativity all the way from grade 2 to grade 12. So, and even though this is anecdotal, there is good research to support it, but the girls simply disappear around grade 9. So in the earlier grades, they are participating fully, and around grade 9 and all the entries beyond that, they're simply not there. I think that we've got fantastic teachers in our schools. They are amazing people. We don't celebrate them enough. But we are short of role models, teachers in the field, who can really do that play that inspirational role for our students, and particularly for our girls, to look for engineering and computer science as career paths, you know, that are going to be fulfilling. So that's something that I would like to note from a parent's perspective.
Do we have a sense, do the girls disappear in all girls schools as well? Or?
Yeah, there is some research to show that the incidence is less, but it is still there.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got a fair amount of at least anecdotal evidence that shows that many girls-only schools not only don't offer engineering studies, but don't even offer physics. So
wow. There's
an immediate barrier there.
Wow, that's shocking. Okay. Yeah, and final question?
First of all, Yama, my name's Corey Tutt, Malora and the founder of Deadly Science.
Okay.
My question is, you know, only 4 months ago, I had a school from Moa Island in the Torres Strait contact me and say, we've got no Lego in our school. Now, they didn't have that vital resource, as we're talking about grassroots. We're talking about young kids finding themselves in engineering. And Lego is such an important resource because it builds creativity, it builds, you know, confidence as well. And I think that, you know, what are we doing? What are we doing to address? Sorry. Ooh. Sorry, Corey. Yeah, what are we doing to address, again, the skill shortage in remote communities? Because a lot of these children, for example, I fundraise and I put a greenhouse in Walgett Community College. Now we're keeping young men in school and we're growing vegetables, and we're using STEM and science to grow vegetables to address a problem. Now the problem was during the COVID lockdowns, Walgett got cut off with fresh food. So we're now finding solutions that can never happen again. Now, I've heard a lot about grassroots and a lot about women in engineering, and these are really important. But what about the first engineers? 65,000 years of engineering, fish traps. This is our knowledge. This is also your history. If you're from this country, you come from the country whose first people invented bread. Where is the contribution to First Nations children in this country?
Thank you. That's Corey, who won the Eureka Prize for Science Communication last year for Deadly Science, so congratulations. And yes.
Not enough. So you asked, what are we doing? We are not doing enough. I think that there are some wonderful programs, including one within ATSE called Wonders of Science, that go out to remote and regional communities. They take, amazing role models, engineers and scientists out to those communities and bring the tools and bring the Legos and the robotics kits and try and inspire. But we've got to do more.
I agree. I think we have to do more. I'm starting to see the beginnings of change, both from a bottom-up approach and top-down. Bottom-up, I think that there are some wonderful programs that reach regional communities and really focus on our Indigenous history and engineering capability, and we need to grow those. Top-down, some of the universities I'm involved with having their strategic vision, a commitment to Indigenous culture and learning from our Indigenous cultures. I think we're at the beginning of that, and we need to do more on both approaches, but I think the early signs are good, and let's hope the future strengthens both of those approaches.
And it is committed to in the report as well, and in particular in the section on mathematics, in particular in rural, regional and remote areas. So there, still a long way to go, a lot to be made up for, but it's certainly part of it. Obviously, we've only been able to deep dive into 2 sections of the report this morning, but it's all there. It's tremendous work. It has come from an enormous amount of background work, and I would like you to join me in thanking our 2 presenters here, Jane and Shazia, and also the incredible group of somewhere between 120 scientists and experts and all the policy supporters and staff supporters who made this report possible. I would now like to officially declare this report launched. If anyone has a bottle of champagne, I'm happy to crack it over it. Please take it with you, read it. It is a compelling read. If you're interested in this sector, you should be across all of this and working with others, joining with others to see how we can tackle the policy challenges set out here, and making sure when those policies are put forward that your group, your peers are working to make sure that they get to the next stage. So thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day. It's going to be incredible. Hopefully I'll see you this evening at the Gala Awards event at Daltone House for ATSE's Cluny Ross Awards and other awards. Enjoy the day. Head on upstairs. The coffee is better upstairs, is what I've been told. Plus everything else is going on up there. Oh, much better. I just heard from the CEO. Okay. Would you just join me again in thanking and congratulating the preparers of the report, Our STEM Skilled Future. Thank you.